Impossible. Simply impossible. These were the words whispered by General der Flieger Adolf Galland in September 1943, observing through binoculars the smoldering wreckage of yet another formation of Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters shot down by American gunners. What should have been a routine interception of slow and vulnerable bombers had turned into a massacre for the Luftwaffe. The one responsible for this turnaround in European skies, the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, a war machine that completely redefined the concept of strategic bombing during World War II. But what made this aircraft so lethal was not just its ability to carry 8,000 kilograms of explosives on each mission. It was something much deeper and more disturbing for German defenders: the discovery that they had drastically underestimated not only American technology, but the very nature of modern industrial warfare. The acrid smell of burnt gunpowder mixed with melted metal hung over German airfields, while the distant roar of Wright R-1820 Cyclone engines echoed like an omen of destruction. This is the story of how a flying fortress forever transformed German perception of American air power and revealed a terrifying truth about the industrial capacity of the United States. In early 1935, when the Boeing Model 2999 prototype took off for the first time from Boeing Field in Seattle, few imagined they were witnessing the birth of a legend. The project had emerged from an apparently impossible specification from the U.S. Army Air Corps: create a multi-engine bomber capable of defending American coasts against naval invasion. What Boeing delivered exceeded all expectations. With its 4 Wright R-1820-97 Cyclone engines of 1,200 horsepower each, the B-17 could reach speeds of 462 km/h at 7,620 meters altitude, simultaneously carrying a devastating bomb load. But the real differential lay in its revolutionary defensive system: 13 Browning M2, 50 caliber machine guns strategically positioned to create 360-degree fire coverage. Journalist Richard Williams of the Associated Press coined the term "flying fortress" upon seeing the prototype for the first time, impressed by the amount of defensive armament. What he didn't know was that he was christening the weapon that would break the backbone of the Nazi war machine. The semi-monocoque aluminum fuselage, reinforced with redundant internal structures, allowed the aircraft to continue flying even after severe damage. It was a completely new design philosophy. Instead of avoiding combat, the B-17 was designed to face it head-on and survive. The first major revelation about the true power of the B-17 came on August 17, 1942. During the first American bombing mission over occupied Europe, 12 B-17Es from the 97th Bombardment Group took off from Polbrook Base in England, bound for the Rouen-Sotteville railway yards in France. Oberst Werner Mülders, Luftwaffe ace with 115 confirmed victories, personally led the interception with a formation of Messerschmitt Bf 109Fs. "It will be like shooting ducks," Mülders commented over the radio, confident in the superiority of his fighters. What happened next completely shocked the German pilots. The B-17s flew in a compact defensive formation, creating a deadly crossfire field. When the Bf 109s approached for attack, they were met by a storm of 50 caliber projectiles that turned the sky into a death zone. Sergeant Gunner Kent West, operating the dorsal turret of his B-17, later described, "It was like being inside a medieval fortress, with archers shooting from every window. The German fighters simply couldn't get close without being hit." 3 Bf 109s were shot down in that first encounter, while all B-17s returned to base. Mülders, barely surviving the attack, transmitted a disturbing report to High Command. "These American bombers are different from anything we've faced before." What the Germans discovered in the following months was even more alarming. The B-17 was not just an aircraft, but the product of an unprecedented industrial revolution. Boeing factories in Seattle, Wichita, and other American cities operated 24 hours a day, producing these flying fortresses on a scale that defied comprehension. In 1943, production reached its peak. A new B-17 rolled off the assembly line every 90 minutes. General Major Adolf Galland, commander of German fighters, received intelligence reports that he initially refused to believe. "The Americans are producing 300 heavy bombers per month," his intelligence chief informed him. "That's impossible," Galland replied. "No nation can sustain such a production rate." But the numbers were real and terrifying. While Germany struggled to produce 40 Heinkel, a 177 bombers per month, the Americans were building 10 times more B-17s. Lieutenant Colonel Hans Philipp, veteran fighter pilot with 206 victories, wrote in his diary, "We're not just fighting against airplanes, we're fighting against all of American industrial capacity. For every bomber we shoot down, 2 new ones appear the next day." The reality was even grimmer. Besides B-17s, the Americans also produced B-24 Liberators, B-25 Mitchells, and other bombers in industrial quantities. The German war machine, which had conquered Europe with technological and tactical superiority, now faced an enemy that could simply produce more equipment than they could destroy. The Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission, on August 17, 1943, marked the moment when the Luftwaffe understood the true dimension of the challenge they faced. 376 B-17s took off in 2 massive waves, targeting ball-bearing factories in Schweinfurt and the Messerschmitt production facility in Regensburg. Major Egon Meyer, commander of the 3rd JG2, developed a new frontal attack tactic to face B-17 formations. "Attacking from behind is suicide," he explained to his pilots. "We must come from the front, where they have fewer guns." Even with this tactical innovation, the result was devastating for both sides. 60 B-17s were shot down, but 25 German fighters were also lost, an unsustainable exchange rate for the Luftwaffe. Hauptmann Georg Peter Eder, who shot down 3 B-17s that day, described the experience. "It was like attacking a flying castle. Each B-17 we brought down cost us at least 1 fighter, sometimes 2, and they always came back with more bombers." Colonel Curtis LeMay, commanding the 3rd Air Division, observed something even more significant. Even under intense attack, 316 B-17s managed to hit their targets and cause substantial damage to German factories. Ball-bearing production in Schweinfurt fell 67% in the following months. General Galland, analyzing post-mission reports, reached a disturbing conclusion. "We cannot win a war of attrition against the Americans. They have more planes, more pilots, and more bombs than we can intercept." The psychological impact of B-17 bombings on the German population was as devastating as the physical damage to factories. Marie Vasilchikov, a Russian princess living in Berlin, wrote in her diary in September 1943, "The sound of American engines is different from the British ones. It's deeper, more threatening. When we hear that roar during the day, we know death comes from the blue sky." B-17s operated mainly during daylight, in contrast to RAF night bombings. This created a unique psychological terror. Germans could see their cities being destroyed under sunlight. Dr. Joseph Goebbels, Minister of Propaganda, struggled to maintain population morale. In his private diaries, he admitted, "American daylight bombings are having a devastating effect on civilian morale. People are beginning to question whether we can really win this war." Obergefreiter Klaus Becker, radar operator in Hamburg, witnessed the destructive power of B-17s firsthand. "We saw hundreds of dots on our radars, approaching in perfect formations. We knew each dot represented 8,000 kilos of bombs. It was mathematically terrifying." Operation Gomorrah, although conducted primarily by the RAF, included daylight B-17 attacks that intensified the destruction. More than 40,000 civilians died in 1 week, and 900,000 were left homeless. The impact was so severe that Hitler briefly considered negotiating peace, according to declassified documents from German High Command. The technological evolution of the B-17 throughout the war demonstrated American capability to continuously adapt and improve their weapons systems. The B-17G version, introduced in 1943, incorporated a Bendix chin turret to eliminate the frontal blind spot that German fighters exploited. Lieutenant Robert Morgan, pilot of the famous Memphis Belle, described the difference. "The B-17G was a completely different beast. With the frontal turret, we could face German frontal attacks with concentrated fire." Improvements didn't stop at armament. The Norden bomb site, kept under maximum secrecy, allowed precision bombing from altitudes above 7,600 meters. Bombardier Paul Tibbets, who would later pilot the Enola Gay, trained extensively on the B-17 and observed, "The precision we achieved with the Norden was revolutionary. We could hit a target the size of a football field from 25,000 feet altitude." Germans desperately tried to develop countermeasures. The R-4M Orkan rocket was designed specifically to destroy B-17 formations, but arrived too late to affect the war's outcome. The Me-262, first operational jet fighter, was also developed partially as a response to B-17s, but Hitler insisted on using it as a bomber. General der Jagdflieger Johannes Steinhoff commented bitterly, "We had the technology to face the B-17s, but we didn't have time, resources, or strategic leadership to implement it effectively." B-17 strategic bombing campaign revealed a fundamental truth about modern warfare. Industrial capacity had become more important than individual tactical superiority. Between 1942 and 1945, B-17s flew 291,508 combat missions over Europe, dropping 640,036 tons of bombs. These numbers represented more than physical destruction. They represented the materialization of American industrial power transformed into military force. General Karl Spaatz, commander of strategic air forces, observed, "Every B-17 we send over Germany carries with it not just bombs, but the message that America can produce war on an industrial scale." The economic impact was devastating for the Reich. German synthetic fuel production fell 90% between May and September 1944, primarily due to B-17 attacks on refineries. German aircraft production, which had reached 2,400 units per month in 1944, plummeted to less than 800 in March 1945. Albert Speer, German armament minister, admitted in his post-war interrogations, "American bombings broke our ability to sustain war production. We couldn't repair factories as quickly as they destroyed them." The human cost was also significant. 4,754 B-17s were lost in combat, taking with them more than 47,000 American crew members. But even these losses demonstrated American determination. For every B-17 lost, 3 new ones were produced. For every crew member killed, 2 new pilots completed training. It was implacable mathematics that Germany couldn't match. The legacy of the B-17 flying fortress transcended its function as a weapon of war, becoming a lasting symbol of American capability to transform industrial power into military victory. When the last combat B-17 landed in May 1945, it carried with it more than a victorious crew. It carried definitive proof that World War II had been won as much in the factories of Detroit and Seattle as on the battlefields of Europe. General Dwight Eisenhower, reflecting on the contribution of strategic bombers, declared, "The B-17 not only destroyed German capacity to make war, it demonstrated to the world that American industrial democracy was invincible." The final numbers tell an impressive story. 12,631 B-17s were produced during the war, a testament to American industrial mobilization capacity. Each aircraft represented 13,000 hours of human labor, 600,000 rivets, and coordination of hundreds of suppliers across the country. It was a miracle of organization and production that the Germans never managed to equal. Today, only a dozen B-17s still fly, living relics of an era when the world's fate depended on a nation's ability to transform steel and aluminum into freedom. The roar of their Wright Cyclone engines, when heard at modern air shows, still echoes with the power that once broke the backbone of European fascism. As military historian Stephen Ambrose observed, the B-17 flying fortress was not just an aircraft, it was the materialization of the American dream turned into a Nazi nightmare.